At my mother's funeral, as I laid flowers on her casket, my father gripped my arm so tightly it hurt. His voice cut through the whispers of the crowd. Leave. Now. Don't look back. At first I thought grief had snapped something inside him. Who tells their child to walk out on their own mother's burial? But then I saw it, the sheer panic in his eyes. It wasn't sorrow, it was fear. And in that moment, I had no idea fear of what. I froze. The churchyard was filled with relatives, neighbors, colleagues. Every pair of eyes seemed locked on me as my father yanked at my sleeve. My aunt's mouth fell open, my cousins whispered. My grandmother gasped so loud the organist stopped playing for a beat. They thought I was disrespecting my mother. I wanted to scream I wasn't, but how do you explain when you don't even understand it yourself? Dad! What are you doing? I hissed under my breath. His grip only tightened. Trust me, he muttered, his jaw clenched. If you love me, trust me. His urgency scared me more than the stairs. Against every instinct telling me to stay, I let him drag me down the aisle, past the shocked faces of my own family, out into the cold October wind. My heart pounded like I was the one committing a crime. The second the doors shut, I yanked my arm free. What the hell was that? I snapped. My voice cracked with grief and rage. He leaned against the stone wall, his eyes darting like he expected someone to burst through the doors after us. You don't understand, he said. It wasn't safe in there. I stared at him in disbelief. Safe? We were at a funeral, surrounded by family. Who would threaten us at my mother's burial? The words made no sense, and yet the trembling in his hands told me he believed them. I wanted to storm back in, to throw myself at my mother's casket one last time. But then I noticed something. A figure in black, standing alone by the gates. Not weeping, not praying, just watching us. My stomach dropped. The stranger's face was hidden under a hat, but their posture was rigid, predatory. They hadn't been in the church before. They were waiting outside, watching us leave. And the way my father's eyes flicked toward them told me he had seen it too. Get in the car, he ordered. His voice was low, urgent. Dad, no, I protested. Tell me what's going on. He shook his head. Later, please. His desperation silenced me. We climbed into the car, and as he pulled away from the church, I glanced out the back window. The figure had turned slowly to face us. They didn't move. They didn't follow. Just stood there like a shadow nailed to the earth. My skin crawled. The drive was silent except for the sound of the tires on wet asphalt. I stared at my father, waiting for him to explain, but he kept his eyes fixed on the road, jaw locked so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Finally, I broke. You ruined everything. Everyone thinks we disrespected her. They're going to hate us forever. My father's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Better they hate us than bury you next to her, he muttered. The words hit me like ice water. I turned to him, stunned. What do you mean by that? He didn't answer. He just pressed harder on the accelerator, as if distance was the only shield we had. And I couldn't shake the image of that figure by the gates, silent, still, and somehow connected to the reason my father had dragged me from my mother's funeral like a fugitive. All I knew was this. Grief wasn't the only thing haunting us. Something darker had walked into our lives, and my father was terrified it would take me too. That night, I lay awake replaying every second. My father pacing the living room downstairs, my phone buzzing with furious texts from relatives. How could you walk out? What's wrong with you? Your mother deserved better. Each word burned. But the truth was, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I only knew my father's fear was real. And the worst part? Deep down, I believed him. Because the last look in his eyes wasn't madness. It was warning. And whatever he was protecting me from, had already been close enough to stand in the crowd and watch us mourn. I couldn't sleep that night. The funeral should have been closure, but instead, it opened a door to fear I didn't understand. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in black, still as stone, watching us with eyes I couldn't see but could feel burning into me. My father stayed downstairs, pacing until dawn. When I finally confronted him, his face looked years older. "Dad," I demanded, "what aren't you telling me? Why did we run like criminals?" He rubbed his temples and muttered, "Because your mother's death wasn't natural, and the one responsible was there." His words cut me open. "What are you saying? She had a stroke. That's what the doctors said." He slammed his fist on the table, startling me. "That's what they wanted you to believe. But she told me, days before she died, that someone was watching her. She said if anything happened, it wouldn't be an accident." I shook my head, refusing to accept it. But then a memory surfaced. Her late-night phone calls, her sudden flinches when the doorbell rang, her whispering my name with a strange urgency. I had written it off as stress. Now I wasn't sure. When the house finally went quiet, I slipped into my mother's room. Her scent still lingered on the pillow. My chest ached, but I pushed through, searching drawers and boxes. At the back of her jewelry case, taped under the lining, I found a folded envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were letters, handwritten, trembling, unfinished. Words like threats, "Promise me you'll protect them," and a name that made my blood run cold. Daniel, my uncle, my father's own brother. I dropped the paper like it was fire. The next day, the tension in the family exploded. My aunts cornered me, accusing me of shaming my mother's memory. "Your father has lost his mind," one hissed. "Dragging you out like that? Disgusting." I wanted to scream at them, tell them about the letters. But how could I, when I didn't even understand the full truth myself? My father, standing behind me, said nothing. He just put a hand on my shoulder and steered me away, as if even words were dangerous to speak aloud. That silence only deepened the cracks between us and the rest of the family. I confronted him that night, shoving the letters onto the table. "You knew," I accused. His eyes scanned the paper, and his shoulders sank. "I hoped you wouldn't find these," he whispered. "Your mother wanted to keep you safe from it all." My voice trembled. "Safe from what? From Uncle Daniel?" His jaw tightened. He finally nodded. "Your mother discovered something about him. Something dangerous. She was going to expose it. And then, she was gone." I wanted him to keep talking, to explain everything, but he only looked at the floor. His silence felt like betrayal. My chest burned with anger and grief. Uncle Daniel had hugged me at the reception, whispered how sorry he was for my loss, his cologne choking me. If what Dad said was true, that same man might have caused it. I couldn't just sit still. That night, I went through old boxes in the attic, desperate for proof. And there it was. A series of receipts, hidden inside an old photo album. Large withdrawals, shady wire transfers, dates that aligned with my mother's paranoia. And tucked between them, a photo of my mother at a charity gala, with Daniel in the background, glaring at her instead of smiling. The realization hit like a knife. She hadn't been imagining things. She had been hunted. And if my father hadn't dragged me from the funeral, maybe I would have been next. I felt sick. My own uncle. My blood. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The way he always dismissed her, belittled her intelligence, the smug smile he wore at family dinners. The motive wasn't clear yet, but the malice was undeniable. And now the letters, the receipts, the photo, all pointed in one direction. I wanted to run to the police, but Dad stopped me. "Without concrete proof, we're just painting targets on our backs," he warned. His voice shook. "Daniel isn't stupid. He has influence, money, friends in high places. My heart sank. He was right. No one would believe a grieving daughter over a respected businessman. But I couldn't just sit in silence, not when my mother had died for knowing too much. So I made a choice. If Dad wouldn't confront him, I would. Even if it meant facing the same danger that had stolen her from us. The next family gathering was the chance. A memorial dinner, hosted by Daniel himself. Everyone would be there. My stomach knotted as we pulled up to his mansion, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. My father's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "We leave early." But my mind was already set. I was going to find the truth, even if it meant tearing the family apart in front of everyone. As we stepped inside, Daniel greeted us with a smile too smooth, too polished. And when his eyes met mine, I swore, for a split second. I saw the same cold gleam I had seen at the cemetery gates. Daniel's house was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses, but all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. Every corner of the room held faces I had known my whole life. People who had hugged me when I scraped my knee, who had sat beside me at Christmas dinner. But now all I could see was betrayal waiting to be exposed. My father kept a tight grip on my arm, trying to steer me away from the spotlight. But Daniel himself intercepted us, smiling that too perfect smile. "I was sorry you couldn't stay at the funeral," he said softly, his eyes cold even as his lips curved. "It was disrespectful." His words were bait, and I almost snapped back. But instead I forced myself to smile. "We left because my father thought it wasn't safe," I said evenly. A hush fell near us. Conversation slowed. Daniel's smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place. "Not safe?" He chuckled, as though the idea was absurd, but the twitch in his jaw told me he knew exactly what I meant. My father tugged at my sleeve, whispering, "Stop." But I couldn't. Not now. I stepped closer. "She knew about the transfers, the threats. She wrote your name." Gasps rose from nearby relatives. Daniel's face stayed frozen in that polished grin, but his eyes burned. "Careful," he said under his breath. "Grief makes people see monsters where there are none." He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, but the pressure was bruising. My father moved forward, pulling me back. "Don't touch her," he growled. The room stilled. You could feel the shift, the family sensing a crack in the mask Daniel wore. I pulled the photo from my pocket and held it up. My mother, radiant at a gala, and behind her, Daniel glaring, caught mid-expression. I had circled it in red ink. The room erupted, murmurs, accusations, questions flying. Daniel's smile finally collapsed into a snarl. "You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed. But his tone betrayed him. My father raised his voice so the whole room could hear. "She died because she threatened to expose you. Don't you dare deny it now." Daniel snapped. His calm cracked into rage. She should have stayed quiet. The words spilled out before he could stop them. The room froze. Every relative's eyes widened in horror. My father lunged forward, shoving him back, but it was too late. His outburst was the confession we needed. Aunts shrieked. Cousins backed away as if the air itself had become toxic. Daniel's mask was gone, his secret now bleeding into the open. He looked at me, pure venom in his stare. "And you'll end up just like her if you're not careful." The threat was real, but so was the shift in power. The family no longer saw me as the disrespectful daughter who walked out of the funeral. They saw the truth, a predator hiding in plain sight. Police were called. Daniel tried to backtrack, to twist his words, but the damage was done. Whispers of his shady dealings and temper spilled from relatives who had stayed quiet for years. My father stood beside me, no longer silent, his arm firm around my shoulders as if to shield me from the storm. Later, I found myself back at the cemetery. The October wind was sharp, but the air felt lighter. I stood before my mother's grave, tracing her name with my fingers. "You were right," I whispered. "You saw the danger before any of us did, and you saved me, even after you were gone." Behind me, my father's footsteps crunched on gravel. He didn't speak, but when he placed his hand on my shoulder, I finally understood the look in his eyes that day at the funeral. It wasn't madness. It wasn't grief. It was love. And the desperate fear of a man who had already lost one soul to the darkness and refused to lose another. As I laid fresh flowers on her grave, I felt something shift inside me. My family was shattered, trust broken beyond repair. But the truth was out, and the shadow that had stalked us was gone. My mother's death would never just be a tragedy. It would be the reason I learned that sometimes the closest blood can carry the sharpest knife. And that sometimes, survival means leaving when the person you love most tells you to run.